My name is Alara Vance. For 28 years, my professional life was tethered to a single entity, the Sterling Thorn Corporation. I joined them when they were a fledgling engineering firm operating out of a converted warehouse on the industrial side of Port Meridian, a city that hugs the coastline with a stoic, quiet grace. I wasn't just an employee, I was part of the foundation. I remember the scent of sawdust and ambition in that first office, the way Arthur Sterling, our founder and CEO, used to sketch project blueprints on diner napkins over coffee. We built Sterling Thorn from the ground up, our shared dream rising with the glass and steel towers that slowly began to punctuate the city's skyline. My role, Senior Director of Infrastructural Strategy, was a title I had earned, line by line, project by project, year by year. It was my name on the contracts that built bridges, designed sustainable power grids, and laid the groundwork for entire communities. My life was a quiet tapestry woven from deadlines, blueprints, and the deep, abiding satisfaction of seeing a complex plan come to fruition. The last project, the one that would define my legacy, was the Helios Desalination Initiative. It was a monumental undertaking, a $250 million partnership to bring clean, sustainable water to an arid coastal region. It had consumed the last 18 months of my life. I had negotiated with international water authorities, navigated Byzantine environmental regulations, and spent countless nights on video calls with engineers in time zones 9 hours ahead. The work was intricate, demanding, and beautiful in its complexity. Now, on a Tuesday afternoon with the soft, gray light of Port Meridian filtering through my office window, the final piece was about to click into place. On my monitor, the secure portal for the Helios contract glowed softly. All the documents were signed, all the subsidiary clauses ratified. All that remained was my final digital signature, a unique authorization process I had designed myself. It was called the Integrity Protocol, a multi-layered verification system that tied the final execution to my specific workstation, a unique cryptographic key, and a vocal authorization. It was my guarantee that a project of this magnitude could not be altered or pushed through without the final, knowing consent of the person who had built it. The cursor blinked, a patient, digital heartbeat waiting for me to speak the final command. Then, the heavy oak door to my office swung open without a knock. Arthur Sterling stood in the doorway. The years had changed him. The easy smile he wore in the early days had been replaced by a polished, practiced veneer. He was no longer the man who dreamed on napkins. He was the man who presented those dreams to boards. And he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a young woman, perhaps 24 or 25, dressed in a sharply tailored cream-colored suit. She held a sleek, rose-gold tablet to her chest like a shield, her expression a careful blend of deference and ambition. "Alara," Arthur said, his voice imbued with a casual warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "Have you got a moment?" I straightened in my chair, my hand hovering over the trackpad. "Arthur, I'm just about to execute the final authorization for Helios." Yes. "Excellent work on that, truly," he said, stepping further into the room. He gestured toward the young woman. "I'd like you to meet my niece, Isabel." "Isabel, this is Alara Vance." Isabel stepped forward and offered a bright, confident smile. "It's such an honor to meet you, Ms. Vance. I've heard so much about your work." I offered a polite nod, my focus still on the blinking cursor. "It's a pleasure. Arthur, I really should finalize this. The Helios team is waiting for confirmation." "That won't be necessary," he said, his smile tightening just a fraction. "Isabel will be taking it from here." The words hung in the air, heavy and nonsensical. I looked from his face to Isabel's, searching for the punchline of a joke I didn't understand. "Taking what from here? The project is complete. I just need to give the final authorization." "That's the thing, Alara," Arthur said, his tone shifting from casual to coolly efficient. "We're making some changes. A strategic realignment. Isabel is going to be heading up our new Special Ventures division. She'll be overseeing the implementation phase of the Helios project." My mind struggled to process the information. Overseeing implementation? I had personally selected the lead engineers for that phase. My own team was prepped to manage it for the next 5 years. "I don't understand," I said, my voice quiet. "My role is to see this project through to full operation." Arthur's gaze was unwavering. "Your role at Sterling Thorn has come to an end, Alara. Effective immediately." The air left my lungs in a silent rush. 28 years. The sawdust, the late nights, the bridges, the grids, the communities. My entire professional life condensed into a single, brutal sentence. I looked at Isabel, who was now avoiding my gaze, her focus suddenly intent on the glossy surface of her tablet. She was the strategic realignment. Security will assist you with gathering your personal items, Arthur continued, as if discussing catering for a luncheon. We'll have everything couriered to your home. We appreciate your decades of service. Decades of service. The phrase felt like a cheap, hollow epitaph. My mouth opened, but no words came out. The shock was a physical thing, a cold wave washing over me, leaving me numb and utterly still. My chair was still warm from my body, the office filled with the quiet hum of my computer, the screen still displaying the waiting portal. The system I had built, the protocol that ensured integrity, was still waiting for my voice. Arthur and his niece clearly didn't know that. They saw a button to be pushed, a box to be checked. They didn't see the architecture beneath it. Slowly, I rose from my chair. My legs felt unsteady, like they belonged to someone else. I looked at Isabel, whose bright smile had returned, a little strained this time. "Congratulations, Isabel," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I even extended my hand. "I hope you're prepared for what this project entails." She took my hand, her grip brief and cool. "I'm a very fast learner," she said, her confidence unwavering. I didn't close the portal. I didn't log out. I simply pushed my chair back under my desk, picked up the wool coat draped over its back, and walked out of the office I had occupied for 17 years. I didn't look back at the blinking cursor, the silent, waiting gatekeeper that held the key to a $250 million project. I just walked, the quiet rhythm of my own footsteps the only sound in a world that had suddenly gone silent. The goodbye I never received echoed in the cavernous silence of my apartment. I hadn't expected a farewell party or a gold watch, but the sheer, surgical coldness of my excision left a void where my professional identity used to be. For 2 days, I moved through my home like a ghost, the city's familiar sounds, the distant clang of a streetcar, the cry of gulls over the harbor, feeling alien and remote. My work had been my anchor, and now I was adrift. The cardboard box arrived on Thursday. It was delivered by a courier who didn't make eye contact, a manila tag bearing my address the only identifier. Inside were the contents of my office, packed with an impersonal efficiency that felt like another small cruelty. My collection of fountain pens, a framed photo of my late husband, a small, smooth stone I'd picked up from a beach near a project site in Nova Scotia, and my leather-bound notebooks filled with 28 years of notes, calculations, and ideas. Leafing through them was like reading an archaeological record of my own life. But what stung more than the box was the digital erasure that followed. On Friday morning, an email from Sterling Thorne's corporate communications landed in my personal inbox. It had been sent to the entire company and, by some cruel oversight, to my newly deactivated corporate address, which still forwarded to my personal account for a grace period of 1 week. The subject line read, "A new era of innovation. Welcoming Isabel Sterling." The email was effusive, filled with corporate jargon about synergy, disruption, and next-generation leadership. It announced Isabel Sterling's appointment as the new director of special ventures and celebrated her instrumental role in securing the landmark Helios desalination initiative. Her role. There was a link to a feature article in Port Meridian Business Quarterly. I clicked it, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The page loaded to reveal a large, glossy photograph of Isabel. She was seated in my chair, at my desk, one hand resting proprietarily on the burled wood surface. The soft light from the window I had stared out of for years illuminated her face. The headline read, "The Millennial Visionary, How Isabel Sterling Landed the Deal of the Decade." I read the article, my breath catching in my throat. Isabel was quoted extensively. "From the moment I joined the team," she said, "I knew we had to be bold. The old ways of doing things, the endless deliberation, it wasn't going to cut it. I saw an opportunity to accelerate the timeline and push for a more aggressive finalization. The Helios Consortium, they responded to that energy. They wanted a partner who was as forward-thinking as they were." Endless deliberation. She was describing my painstaking process of due diligence, my careful relationship building, my commitment to getting every single detail right. She painted my meticulousness as a weakness, a relic of a bygone era. She had taken my life's work and reframed it as a dusty antique she had polished up for the modern world. Comments were already flooding the online version of the article. "So inspiring to see young women leading the charge," one read. "This is the kind of fresh perspective Sterling Thorne needed," said another. I closed the laptop, the glowing screen feeling like a source of heat and poison. The bitterness was a physical taste in my mouth, coppery and sharp. They hadn't just fired me. They had stolen my story, editing me out of my own narrative and pasting in a new protagonist. Later that afternoon, a text message buzzed on my phone. It was from Leo, a brilliant and kind young man from the IT department whom I had mentored for years. "Leo, Alara, I saw the article. It's disgusting. None of it is true. We all know you built Helios from the ground up." I stared at his words, a small fissure of warmth cracking through the ice of my isolation. I knew what it cost a junior employee to send a message like that. It was a risk, a small act of loyalty in a corporate culture that was clearly rewarding the opposite. Me, thank you, Leo. That means more than you know. I didn't tell him what was coming. I didn't tell him about the integrity protocol, the quiet guardian standing watch on my old computer. They had taken my office, my title, and my story. But they had forgotten about the system. And the system did not recognize new narratives. It only recognized the truth of its own code. It only recognized its architect. And it was still waiting. The thing about integrity, whether in a person or a system, is that it cannot be feigned. It is either present or it is not. The integrity protocol I had designed was the digital embodiment of that principle. It wasn't merely a password, it was a digital soul, a composite of my physical presence and intellectual property. The protocol required 3 authentications: the unique hardware signature of my office workstation, the cryptographic key stored on a thumb drive I now kept in a small fireproof box in my study, and my voice print, speaking a specific passphrase that changed daily based on a secure algorithm. It was, as Arthur had once joked during a security review, beautifully paranoid. I had simply called it thorough. On Monday morning, nearly a week after my dismissal, my phone buzzed with another text from Leo. "Leo, they're trying to push the Helios payment through. It's not working." A slow, cold calm settled over me. It was beginning. Me, what's the error message? Leo, authorization failed. Inconsistent origin node. Isabel is furious. She keeps saying to just override it. I tried to explain that the protocol is hard-coded into the execution layer and that I don't have the clearance. Nobody does. Only the originating admin has that. Me, and did you tell them who the originating admin is? Leo, I had to. Arthur is losing his mind. He's demanding a full system diagnostic. I could picture the scene perfectly. Isabel, her polished confidence cracking, jabbing at a keyboard that refused to obey her. Arthur, his face flushed with frustration, barking orders that no one could follow. And Leo, caught in the middle, trying to explain a concept they couldn't grasp, that the system was designed to protect the deal from exactly this kind of unauthorized, uninformed handling. They believed power came from a title on a business card. They didn't understand that true authority, in this case, was embedded in the very architecture they were trying to command. The irony was a slow burn. For years, I had built systems to protect Sterling Thorne from external threats. It had never occurred to me that the greatest threat would come from within, from the very top of the company. I hadn't built the protocol as a weapon against them. I had built it to preserve the sanctity of the work itself. My sudden absence had inadvertently weaponized it. I walked to my window and looked out at the harbor. A ferry was making its slow, steady journey across the gray water, a line of white foam in its wake. It moved with a purpose I suddenly felt mirrored in myself. I was no longer adrift. I was waiting. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I poured myself a small glass of aged scotch, the one my husband and I used to reserve for celebrating major milestones. I sat in my quiet living room, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside, and I opened an old, leather-bound journal. I didn't write about Sterling Thorne. I didn't write about Arthur or Isabel. I wrote about the Helios project. I wrote about the elegant engineering of reverse osmosis, the challenge of creating a sustainable power source in a fragile ecosystem, the names of the lead hydrologists I had come to respect. I wrote to remember that the work was real, that it had existed before Isabel Sterling had ever learned its name, and that it would exist long after she was gone. I was reclaiming my own story, word by word, even if only for myself. Because I knew the phone would ring. It was no longer a question of if, but when. And when it did, I would be ready. Not with anger, but with the unshakable clarity of a woman who knew her own worth, a worth that couldn't be packed in a box or erased by a press release. The first overture from the outside world came not from Sterling Thorne, but from the other side of the deal. On Wednesday morning, an email appeared in my inbox with a name that made my heart beat a little faster: Elias Vance, Senior Director of the Helios Water Consortium. No relation, but I had always felt a kinship with him. He was a man of quiet intelligence and deep integrity, an engineer by training who spoke of water with a kind of reverence. We had spent dozens of hours together, hashing out the technical minutiae of the contract. He was a man who valued thoroughness. I had been wrestling with whether to contact him, to give him some kind of professional, courteous farewell. It felt wrong to simply vanish after the partnership we had built. I had drafted and deleted the email a dozen times, worried it would sound like sour grapes. His email saved me the trouble. Subject: a quick question. Helios contract. Dear Alara, I hope this message finds you well. My team and I are reviewing the final execution documents sent over by your new Director of Special Ventures, Isabel Sterling. We've noticed a few minor formatting changes and a discrepancy in the date stamps on a technical addendum compared to the last version we reviewed with you. It's likely just a clerical issue, but I wanted to reach out to you for clarification, as you were our primary point of contact. Also, we were not informed of a leadership transition on the project. Is this a permanent change? Best regards, Elias. My hands were perfectly still as I read his message. They had altered the contract. After I was gone, they had gone into the final documents and made changes without the client's knowledge. It was more than arrogant. It was a flagrant breach of protocol and trust. And the integrity protocol, in its silent, elegant wisdom, had caught it. The inconsistent origin node error wasn't just because Isabel was using the wrong computer. It was because the document itself was no longer the one I had prepared for final signature. The system had detected an unauthorized change. I took a deep breath, my course of action suddenly crystal clear. I wasn't going to accuse anyone. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to do what I had always done: provide precise, truthful information. Dear Elias, thank you for your message. To answer your question, my role with Sterling Thorne has concluded, and I am no longer involved with the Helios project. Therefore, I am not in a position to speak to any changes made to the contract after my departure. However, for the sake of the partnership we built, you may want to have your legal team pay close attention to the execution requirements outlined in Section 12, subsection C, of the Master Agreement. It specifies the conditions required for final authorization. I wish you and the Helios Consortium all the best. Warmly, Alara Vance. I hit send. Section 12, subsection C, was the clause that detailed the integrity protocol. It explicitly stated that final authorization required a multi-layered biometric and cryptographic verification from the designated originating administrator. It was a clause Elias and I had discussed at length. I had explained it was Sterling Thorne's guarantee of security and authenticity. He had called it reassuringly robust. They had not only failed to execute the protocol, they had also, it seemed, failed to even read it. 15 minutes later, Elias's reply came. It was 2 sentences long. Alara, I've just reviewed Section 12C. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I am placing an immediate hold on our side of the execution pending a full review. I closed my laptop and felt a profound sense of calm. I hadn't fired a single shot, yet the battle lines had been redrawn. I hadn't needed to scream betrayal. The quiet hum of a well-built system and the integrity of a good man had spoken for me. That afternoon, the news cycle caught up. An anonymous source, I suspected Leo, or perhaps someone on Elias's team, leaked the story to Global Infrastructure Report, a major industry publication. The headline was stark: Sterling Thorne's $250 million Helios deal stalls amid internal protocol conflict. The article detailed how the deal was frozen due to an unbreakable, custom security protocol linked exclusively to a recently departed senior executive. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. The industry was small. Everyone would know. The story spread like wildfire. Sterling Thorne's stock, which had enjoyed a small bump after the initial announcement of the secured deal, began to slide. The comments on the article were brutal. They weren't celebrating next-generation leadership anymore. They were mocking a legacy firm that had apparently locked itself out of its own biggest deal. I sat in my armchair, watching the rain begin to streak down the window pane, and I didn't feel triumph. I felt a quiet, somber vindication. I had built a house with a very strong foundation, and when they had tried to knock out a supporting wall, they were discovering that the whole structure was designed to stand with it, or not at all. The call I had been waiting for came at 10:17 p.m. on a Thursday night. It wasn't Arthur, his voice laced with false bonhomie. It was his lawyer. A curt, formal request for a meeting. Mr. Sterling would like to discuss a resolution, the man had said. I agreed, but on my own terms. The meeting will take place at my counsel's office. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Genevieve, had represented me for years on personal matters. When I called her that morning to explain the situation, there was a long pause on the other end of the line before she let out a low whistle. Alara, she'd said, this is the most elegant checkmate I've ever seen. I arrived at her office 15 minutes early. It was a calm, quiet space, filled with books and the scent of lemon oil. We sat in her conference room, a single manila folder on the polished mahogany table between us. It contained my original employment contract, the signed security authorizations for the integrity protocol, and a printout of the email exchange with Elias Vance. Arthur arrived precisely at 2. He looked haggard. The bespoke suit was still perfect, but his face was pale and there were dark circles under his eyes. He entered the room alone, his usual aura of command replaced by a weary tension. Alara, he said, his voice strained. Thank you for seeing me. I nodded, gesturing to the chair opposite me. Genevieve remained silent, her hands folded calmly on the table. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. We have a problem, he said, his gaze fixed on me. The Helios deal. We can't get past the final protocol. The client has frozen the deal. The board is concerned. It's not a problem, Arthur, I replied, my voice even. It's a feature. The system is working exactly as it was designed to. He winced, a flicker of his old frustration breaking through. A feature that is costing this company millions of dollars by the hour. We need you to come in and authorize it. You mean you need me to fix the situation you created, I stated, not as a question, but as a fact. I know the transition was abrupt, he conceded, the word abrupt, doing an immense amount of work. It was a board decision. We needed to show a fresh face, a new direction. You didn't need to erase me, I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. You didn't need to attribute my work, my 18 months of negotiations and design, to someone who hadn't spent a single day on the project. You stood on a stage and talked about my work as endless deliberation while your niece took a bow for it. He had the grace to look away, his eyes falling to the folder on the table. What do you want, Alara? A severance package? Name your price. We'll make it right. Genevieve cleared her throat softly. This is no longer about a severance package, Mr. Sterling. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the cool wood of the table. For 28 years, I gave this company my loyalty, my expertise, and my time. I built things for you, Arthur. Not just projects, but processes. Reputations. The trust that clients like Elias Vance placed in Sterling Thorne was built on the foundation of my work. When you fired me, you didn't just lose an employee. You discarded that legacy. You told the world it was worthless. I paused, letting the silence stretch. You want me to come back and type in a password to save you from your own choices? You want me to legitimize the lie you told? You want me to hand over the key to the house I built so you and your niece can live in it? His face, already pale, seemed to lose its remaining color. He finally understood. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. I'm not for sale, Arthur, I said quietly. My integrity is not a line item on your balance sheet. I stood up, smoothing the front of my jacket. You wanted a future for Sterling Thorne that didn't include me. Congratulations. You have it. I walked to the door and paused, my hand on the handle. I looked back at the man who had been my mentor, my partner, and ultimately, my betrayer. Legacy is a heavy thing, Arthur. You shouldn't have treated it so lightly. Then I walked out into the afternoon light, leaving him alone in the quiet room with my lawyer, the untouched folder, and the full weight of his consequences. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt free. The anchor hadn't just been cut. I had realized it was never holding me. It was holding them. The collapse was swift and total. The day after my meeting with Arthur, Helios Water Consortium officially terminated the $250 million contract. Their press release was a masterpiece of corporate diplomacy and devastating critique. It cited a fundamental breakdown in procedural integrity and a loss of confidence in Sterling Thorne's current project management leadership. They praised the foundational work of the project's original architects while simultaneously severing ties with the company. Sterling Thorne's stock plummeted by nearly 20%. The board, which had apparently sanctioned Arthur's fresh-face strategy, went into crisis mode. Within 48 hours, Arthur Sterling was forced to step down as CEO. An interim leader from outside the company was brought in to stop the bleeding. Isabel Sterling's name vanished from the company website. Her LinkedIn profile, once a shrine to her disruptive genius, was quietly deactivated. She was gone, erased more completely than they had ever tried to erase me. I watched it all unfold from a distance, from my favorite armchair, from the corner table at a quiet cafe downtown where the coffee was strong and no one knew my name. I felt a profound, almost peaceful sense of detachment, like watching a storm rage over a distant shore. I had not caused the storm. I had simply built a lighthouse that revealed the dangerous rocks they were steering toward. A week later, my phone rang. It was Elias Vance. "Alara," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "I imagine you've seen the news." "I have," I replied. "Our board was impressed," he said, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Not just with the integrity of your work, but with the integrity of your systems. We're moving forward with the Helios project, but we're bringing the primary oversight in-house." He paused. "And we want you to lead it." I was taken aback. "Elias, I'm not looking for another corporate position." "I'm not offering one," he said quickly. "We want to retain you as an independent consultant, as our lead strategic advisor. You set your own terms, your own hours. You answer to no one but me and the board. We don't want to buy your time, Alara. We want to partner with your judgment." He then named a compensation figure that was nearly double my former salary. I walked to my window and looked out at the city. It looked different now. Not like a place of ghosts and painful memories, but like a landscape of possibility. The work wasn't the building, it was the blueprint. And I could take my blueprints anywhere. "Send me the paperwork, Elias," I said, a smile touching my lips for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, I signed the contract from my own dining room table. There was no grand ceremony, no press release. Just a quiet signature, a new beginning built on my own terms. That Friday, I returned to the downtown cafe. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The barista, a young woman with kind eyes, brought my cappuccino. "On the house," she said with a small smile. "You look like you're celebrating something." I looked down at my cup, the swirl of foam like a miniature galaxy. I wasn't celebrating their failure. I was celebrating my own quiet, resilient survival. I was celebrating the discovery that my worth was not something that could be given or taken away by a title or a corner office. It was something I carried within me. My phone buzzed with one last text from Leo. "Leo, they're auctioning off the old office furniture. Guess your desk is up for grabs." I smiled to myself. They could have the desk. They could have the chair, the office, the company name. I had taken the only thing that ever truly mattered, the work, the reputation, and the unshakable knowledge that a structure built with integrity, whether of concrete or of code, will always outlast the people who try to compromise it. The cursor was no longer blinking. The waiting was over. My work was just beginning.